I'm 80 years old. I've been married for 60 of those years, and tonight I'm sitting in a quiet house, realizing how much of a life can pass without anyone ever asking you to tell the truth about it. My husband is asleep in the next room. He sleeps lightly now. I can hear every breath. That sound used to comfort me. Some nights it still does. Other nights, it reminds me how close the end feels for both of us. I'm not telling this because our marriage was a failure. It wasn't. We stayed. We raised children. We did what people call making it work. I'm telling this because staying is not the same thing as understanding what you're slowly losing. When you're this old, memories don't come in order. They arrive like guests who don't knock. The look, sentence, a feeling you forgot you ever had. And suddenly you see the pattern that was invisible when you were busy living. I used to believe love was proven by endurance, by how much you could tolerate without leaving. I believed that because that's what I was taught. You stay quiet. You adapt. You don't ask for too much. You don't make things harder than they already are. That belief shaped my whole life. We married young. I was barely out of girlhood. I didn't know who I was yet, only who I was expected to be. Wife, helper, someone steady. He was kind, responsible, serious in a way that felt safe. I didn't fall dramatically in love. I stepped into love carefully, like something fragile I didn't want to break. In the early years, I was busy learning how to belong, how to cook the way he liked, how to keep the house calm, how to not complain when I felt tired or lonely or unsure. I told myself this was maturity. Felt right at the time. That's important to say. None of the mistakes we made felt like mistakes when we made them. They felt reasonable, necessary even. The first mistake was believing my needs were less important than keeping the peace. I didn't silence myself overnight. Happened slowly, one swallowed comment at a time. One moment of deciding it wasn't worth explaining how I felt. One evening of saying it's fine when it wasn't. I thought I was being loving. What I didn't understand was that love without honesty turns into something thinner, something polite. We built a life that looked good from the outside. Clean home, children who did well, neighbors who respected us. I took pride in that. I still do. But inside that life, I learned to measure my words carefully. I learned which parts of myself caused tension and which ones made things smoother. Guess which ones I kept? The second mistake was assuming my husband could read what I didn't say. I believed that if he loved me, he would notice. That he would see when I was tired of carrying everything quietly. That he would sense when I wanted closeness instead of solutions. He didn't. Not because he didn't care. Because I trained him not to look too closely. When he came home from work, exhausted, I made things easier. I didn't bring him my worries. I didn't ask for long conversations. I told myself there would be time later. Later became a habit. The third mistake was losing myself in being useful. I was very good at being needed. The children needed me. The house needed me. He needed me to keep things running smoothly. People praised me for it. Called me strong, capable, reliable. No one asked me what I wanted. I didn't ask myself either. I stopped noticing when my days felt repetitive instead of meaningful. I stopped questioning why I felt lonely in a house full of people. I told myself this was just adulthood. There were moments, small ones, when I felt a quiet sadness I couldn't explain. Folding laundry alone at night. Sitting in the car after dropping the kids off somewhere. Not quite ready to go home. I didn't name that feeling. Naming it would have required listening to it. The fourth mistake was believing time would fix what attention could have. I thought once the children were grown, once things slowed down, once the hard years passed, we would return to each other naturally. I imagined conversations we never actually practiced having. I imagined closeness without learning how to ask for it. Time doesn't repair what you don't tend to. It only makes the gaps more permanent. The fifth mistake was confusing loyalty with intimacy. We were loyal. Completely. We never betrayed each other. We never threatened to leave. But loyalty can exist without deep connection. That's a hard thing to admit after 60 years. There were good moments. I don't want to erase them. Laughter at the dinner table, family trips, shared pride in our children, quiet evenings that felt safe. But safety isn't the same as being known. Now, in this present moment, I see the cost of all those reasonable choices. Not as anger, as understanding. I don't blame my younger self. She was trying to do the right thing with the tools she had. She didn't know that silencing herself would become a habit she couldn't easily undo. If you had asked me at 35 if I was happy, I would have said yes. Meant it. I just didn't know happiness could be fuller than what I allowed myself to want. I'm sharing this because these mistakes don't feel dramatic while you're making them. They feel like maturity, like sacrifice, like being a good partner. You don't see the shape of them until much later, when time has already passed through your hands. I'll pause here. By the time I reached my 60s, I had become very good at living inside routines. They were familiar, predictable. They didn't ask much of me emotionally. That felt like relief at the time. My body began to slow in small ways first. A stiffness in the morning. Fatigue that didn't go away with sleep. Nothing dramatic. Just reminders that I was no longer moving forward without resistance. My husband noticed those changes before I did. He worried in his own quiet way, asked if I was all right, told me to rest more. I appreciated his concern. What I wanted, though, was something harder to explain. I wanted him to sit with me in the uncertainty instead of trying to fix it. That was always our difference. Dissolve, absorb. As we aged, the distance between those two ways of being became more visible. The slow cost of our earlier choices showed up in moments that should have been intimate but weren't. Long drives where we talked about traffic and weather instead of what we were afraid of losing. Evenings spent in the same room, each focused on something separate, comfortable in the quiet but untouched by it. I began to feel lonely in a way that surprised me. Not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of being unseen. That kind of loneliness is harder to admit, especially when the other person hasn't done anything wrong. There were happy moments too. I don't want to pretend otherwise. Family gatherings where laughter filled the house. Pride in our children's lives. Shared memories that still make us smile. Happiness and sorrow often live in the same place. I learned that late. The turning point didn't arrive loudly. Rarely does. It came one afternoon when I was sorting through old drawers, deciding what to keep and what to let go. I found a notebook I had kept in my 30s. I had forgotten it existed. Inside were thoughts I barely recognized. Questions about who I was becoming. Hopes I never followed. Fears I never spoke out loud. I sat on the bed and read until my chest felt tight. I realized then how long it had been since I had asked myself those kinds of questions. How long it had been since anyone else had asked them of me either. That was the moment clarity arrived. Quiet. Undeniable. I hadn't lost my voice because someone took it. I had set it down piece by piece because it felt easier. That understanding was painful, but it was also honest. Around that same time, my husband had a minor health scare. Again, nothing dramatic. Enough to make us pause. Enough to remind us that our bodies were no longer forgiving. Sitting beside him during those appointments, I felt a mix of emotions I hadn't expected. Love, of course, gratitude, and also a deep sadness for all the conversations we had never learned how to have. Fear strips away polite habits. It exposes what's underneath. For a brief period, we talked more honestly than we ever had. About aging, about regret, about what we wished we had done differently. There were tears, there was tenderness, there was also awkwardness, like two people learning a language late in life. Those conversations mattered. They still do, but they also made something clear. You can open your eyes late, but you can't rewind the years. There were things that could not be fixed, not because we didn't care enough, but because time had already done its quiet work. I couldn't go back and be braver when it mattered most. He couldn't suddenly understand the parts of me I had hidden for decades. We could meet where we were. That was all. Accepting that felt heavy and relieving. Now, when I look at our life together, I see both success and loss woven tightly together. We built something stable. We protected each other. We endured. But endurance has a cost if it replaces expression. I don't resent him. I don't resent myself. Resentment requires energy I no longer have. What I feel instead is a steady awareness of what is fragile now. Room, attention, presence. These days I speak more honestly, even when my voice shakes. I tell him when I feel afraid. I tell him when something matters to me. He listens, truly listens. I wish we had learned this sooner. There are moments when grief surfaces unexpectedly. Not for a single event, but for a version of myself I never fully lived. That grief doesn't overwhelm me. It sits beside me. Let it. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life, I want you to know something. Most regret doesn't come from making the wrong choice. Comes from delaying the honest one. I didn't know that until it was nearly too late. I'll stop here. By the time I reached my 40s, my life had settled into a rhythm that rarely changed. Mornings were practical. Get up, make breakfast, pack lunches, keep track of appointments and school events. I moved through the day like someone holding a list in her head that never emptied. I was good at it. That mattered to me. My husband worked long hours. When he came home, he was tired in a way I understood but never questioned. I learned to read his mood the moment he walked through the door. If he was quiet, I stayed light. If he was stressed, I stayed out of the way. I told myself this was partnership. What I didn't see was how much of myself I was slowly setting aside. I don't remember deciding to stop dreaming. Just faded. The things I once thought I might do someday became things I rarely thought about at all. Not because they weren't important, because there was always something more urgent. Urgency is a powerful excuse. Our children filled the house with noise and purpose. I loved being their mother. That love was real and deep. But I also used it to hide from the parts of myself that felt restless. No one warns you that you can love your children fully and still feel quietly empty. I handled birthdays, holidays, school meetings. I knew which child needed encouragement and which needed space. I carried those details without complaint. My husband trusted me with everything at home. That trust felt like respect. Sometimes late at night, I wished he would ask how I was instead of assuming I was fine. He didn't ask. I didn't tell. That pattern solidified without either of us noticing. There were moments when I tried to speak. Small ones. I would mention feeling tired beyond the usual kind, or lonely in a way I couldn't explain. He would offer solutions. Take a day off. Get more rest. Be grateful. I would nod and let the conversation end. I didn't want to seem ungrateful for the life we had built. That was another quiet mistake. Gratitude can silence truth if you let it. As the years passed, I noticed changes in myself before I noticed changes in us. I laughed less freely. I guarded my words more carefully. I felt like a guest in my own inner life. I still loved him. That never went away. Love wasn't the problem. Since was. We talked about logistics easily. Money, schedules, the children's futures. We rarely talked about fears, or disappointments, or how strange it felt to grow older without feeling more understood. I assumed this was normal. Everyone around me lived the same way. Women didn't talk about these things. We compared notes on recipes and responsibilities, not regret. Looking back, I see how lonely we all were together. The slow cost of these choices didn't show up in dramatic ways. It showed up in what didn't happen. I missed opportunities to say, I need more than this. I delayed conversations until they no longer felt natural. I learned how to be content instead of fulfilled. Those are not the same thing. There was a moment in my late 40s when I realized my husband didn't really know what frightened me. Not the big things, the quiet ones. The fear of being forgettable. The fear of having lived correctly but not deeply. That realization didn't come with anger. It came with a soft sadness I carried alone. I told myself it was too late to change how we talked. We had patterns. Patterns felt permanent. That belief was comfortable and wrong. Comfort can be a cage if you stay in it long enough. When the children left home, the house felt larger and emptier all at once. I thought this would be the beginning of something new for us. Instead, we moved around each other politely, like two people who had shared a long commute but not the same destination. We were kind. We were respectful. We were distant in ways neither of us knew how to name. I remember sitting across from him at dinner one night, watching him read the paper, and realizing I didn't know what he was thinking about lately. I also realized he probably didn't know what filled my mind either. That thought scared me more than any argument ever could have. Still, I said nothing. Silence had become familiar. Familiar feels safe even when it hurts. This is the part of life where you start to sense the shape of what you've given up, even if you can't yet name it clearly. A sense that something essential has been postponed for too long. I carried that feeling quietly into the next years of our marriage, hoping time would soften it. Time rarely does. I'll stop here. Now, in the quiet years, I spend a lot of time noticing small things. How the light moves across the wall in the afternoon, how the house sounds different at night, how easily a day can pass without anything needing me. My husband and I sit together more than we used to. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. Our silences are gentler now, but they carry weight. 60 years leaves marks you can't smooth over, only learn to live with. There is love here. That matters to say. There always was. But love does not erase the truth of what was missed. There are things that cannot be fixed at this stage. You cannot go back and say the brave thing when it was still risky. You cannot reclaim the years you spent choosing ease over honesty. You cannot suddenly become known in ways you never practiced allowing. Time does not return what it takes. Accepting that was harder than any argument we ever avoided. I used to think regret would feel sharp like pain. Instead, it feels heavy, low. It sits with you while you make tea, while you fold clothes, while you watch someone you love grow older. Doesn't shout. Wait, there are moments when I look at him and feel a deep tenderness mixed with sorrow. We did the best we knew how. That's true. It just wasn't everything we could have been. Both of those things can exist at the same time. If I could speak directly to you now, I wouldn't tell you what to do. I don't believe in that anymore. Lives are too complicated for instructions. What I wish I had known is simpler than advice. Say the thing while it's still small. Ask the question before it hardens into silence. Let yourself be seen when it feels uncomfortable, not just when it feels safe. I didn't understand that honesty doesn't create distance. Avoiding it does. If this meant something to you, if it stirred a quiet recognition, you're welcome to share your thoughts. Sometimes hearing each other makes the weight lighter. And if you want to hear more stories like this, from people near the end who are finally speaking plainly, you can subscribe to the channel. It's called The Gentle Truths. There's no urgency, just listening. As for me, I know my time is limited now. I feel it in my body, in how quickly a year passes, in how carefully I choose what to spend my energy on. I sit with my husband. I tell him when I love him. I tell him when something hurts. I don't save my words anymore. It won't change the past, but it makes the present honest. And at this age, honesty feels like enough.